So now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Mike Weber. Mike's been working with educators and young people for over 20 years, helping them to change how they think so that they change how they act. According to Mike, he's been a rule breaker for many years. A graduate of agriculture at Cornell, he worked his way through college selling books door to door. His life's work is focused on helping youth and adults harness the leadership skills needed to make a difference in today's complex world. He hikes in the mountains of New Hampshire, although I don't know how he's doing that this winter, provides coaching on creativity, and lives in a small town, and works all over the world asking people to break unwritten rules that are holding them back. Let's give a warm welcome to our speaker, trainer, crazy hiker from Atkinson, New Hampshire, Mike Weber.
Thank you. One of the fascinating things that happens to me occasionally is when I work with young people, they come up after I'm done and they talk to me. 2 months ago, I was at a school in Connecticut and a young lady came up and she looked me right in the eye and she said this: "Why did you come to our school?" Now I want you to know, as a speaker, this is a loaded question, and I'm like, oh great, what did I say? The good news is that it elicited a great conversation. And what she really wanted to understand is, why was I here? What's the purpose? And if you're like most of the audiences I talk with, you're probably in a very similar situation. Well, why are you here? What are you trying to do? So in a nutshell, let me tell you what my hopes are, my dreams are, for the next 40 or 45 minutes. I'm going to ask you to look at what you do. And I'm going to try and encourage you in that activity. But in addition to that, I'm going to ask you to consider the possibility of breaking the unwritten rules. I'm going to ask you to change how you think about what you do. Now, incidentally, before I tell you what the changes are, I want you to know that I know that for some of you this is going to be easy. Every year, I talk to people that love change, they embrace change. But how many of you in here know people that hate change? We're creatures of habit. We think in patterns, we act in patterns. Think about this. How many of you, when you eat dinner at the dining room table, if you do that with your family, how many of you in here have assigned seating at the dining room table? I mean, it's not really assigned, but does everybody know where they're supposed to sit? And by the way, if you have a young man or a young woman at home, I have 2 sons, and you want to have fun with them, when you go home and you're eating dinner, sit in their chair and watch what they do. Let me see if I can show you what it's going to feel like if you leave here today and decide that you're going to go back and shake things up. If you're going to go back and break the unwritten rules that your students have, the unwritten rules that your faculty have, even worse than that, the unwritten rules that your community has. So let me see what if I can show you what it's going to feel like, and for this to work, I need your help. If you do me a favor, sit up straight just for a second, and everybody put your hands up in the air like this. Now, if you would, take your hands and clasp them in front of you. Take a second and look at your thumbs. How many of you in here have the left thumb on top of the right thumb? Okay. How many have the right thumb on top of the left thumb? Okay, how many are not sure? It's early, I know. All right, put them up in the air again. Now put them back together again, and look at your thumbs again. How many of you have the exact same thumb on top? This is an example of a pattern. I actually had a biology teacher one time look at me and she said, "It's genetically defined." I'm like, great. But let me show you what it feels like if I ask you to change. Sit up straight, hands up like this. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to say together. When I say together, put your hands together. Then I'm going to say apart. I'm going to do that twice. The third time, I'm simply going to say switch. When I say switch, put your hands together, but put the opposite thumb on top. Let's see what happens. Ready? Here we go. Together, apart. Together, apart. Switch! I was like this. I usually run into 3 types of responses. She's over there going like this. Look, I did it. It's only thumbs. And every once in a while I run into someone that they do it and they go, ooh, it just feels uncomfortable. But my all-time favorite, and this happens all the time when you ask people to change, I was working at a school in Kansas. And I said switch, and a young man went like this. And he couldn't figure out how to do it. And don't get me wrong, it's not right or wrong which thumb, but it is different. So today, if you'll let me, I'm going to talk to you about breaking unwritten rules. Now, someone did ask me one time, what's an unwritten rule? An unwritten rule is a rule that everybody knows about, nobody talks about, and yet it governs your behavior. They exist everywhere. I'll tell you my favorite one. How many of you in here have ever gone down the interstate and seen a sign that says, speed limit 65, 75? How many of you all have seen something like this? Okay, now, let's be honest with each other. How fast does everybody go? They always go 5 to 10 miles over the speed limit. And here's the crazy part. You can literally go up to anybody and ask them that question, and here's what they'll say. Well, everybody knows that they won't stop you if you're just going 5 to 10 miles over the speed limit. And here's the challenge that you're going to experience if you take these principles and these ideas and take them back to your students. If you're willing to take the concept of change in how you think back to your community, people won't like it. And if you do not think that's true, next time you're on the interstate, if the speed limit is 65, go in the left-hand lane. And go 65. And see what happens.